All right. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Did everybody have a chance to look over the agenda that I sent out earlier? Are there any adjustments people wanted to make to the agenda? We can add items if we need to. Okay. The first item on the agenda was to review, approve the minutes from the January meeting. Max sent those out last week, I believe, or soon earlier than that. Yeah. Did everybody have a chance to look over the minutes? Thank you, Max, for recreating those from the video. I appreciate it. Are there any comments on the minutes from last meeting? Can I have a motion to approve? Motion, can I have a second?
Second.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All in favor to approve the minutes as submitted, raise your hands. Any opposed? Unanimous approval. Okay, great. After last meeting, I sent out some action items that people had agreed to follow up on prior to this meeting. So if we can just get a short report from those assignments, and then I set aside some extended time for Janet and Bob to talk about the things they followed up on. Shellfish Commission, Gail, you're going to talk with Abden.
Sure. And I did talk to Abden. He has been keeping pretty well informed about what's been going on the committee, so was not surprised by anything. Has no concerns at all about construction of a trail near the water. He said he actually is a little less concerned than you are, Julie, about having pets on the trail, as long as his suggestion was that the trail be 75 feet, I think. I'll check that, 75 feet back from the edge of the water, and to deal with it like the river park in town has been dealt with, which is to allow for pets, have bags for people to clean up and continue testing, and if there's any change in E. coli levels, to reconsider. That was just his perspective. He didn't see a reason at this point to ban pets from the walkway. And his only concern was about any kind of excavation on the site that might release into the water, but he's familiar enough with the plan and knows that that's really not a possibility. So no concerns. He would like to be kept nominally abreast of what's going on, and that's what I got. No concerns.
And
Julie,
I would just say that he's one of the Shellfish committee members, and I was not discussed at their last meeting.
Right.
So
It's not representative or just.
I'd be interested to hear what Glenn had to say.
Yeah, I know. I kind of would too.
Well,
I was hoping
yeah.
he was going to bring it up at the committee level, but we had a really long meeting the other night, so he might not have had a chance, but that can be something that's addressed.
Yeah, I invited him to attend here. I asked if he would like someone to attend there, and he really, Abden was comfortable with.
So did I hear a recommendation that we follow up with the whole committee?
I think they'll probably do that in the next meeting.
Okay.
They had a meeting last Thursday, but we had a very full agenda at that meeting.
Okay, do I need to reach out to them? Should I reach out to them?
I can make sure it's on the next.
Okay, great. Thank
Just
you.
to make sure everybody's, because I hate to go with that, and then, because I have a feeling Glenn might have it too.
Okay. Johnny,
Yeah,
question?
just one comment. I live right on the landing, and I know it says no dogs there, but every person who's ever had a dog and the dog does its thing, the people clean it up. I watch, so I would hope that we could just make that stipulation that they've got to clean up after their mess.
Right.
Because that would be a perfect spot to walk your dog. So
Yeah, and that's with the installation of those bags.
And the 75 feet comes from the state, because that's how they deal with it with agriculture. That
Okay.
75-foot barrier.
Great. Thank you, Gail. Max, you're going to follow up with the Conservation Committee to determine if it was still functional.
Yeah, there is no conservation.
There's no
commission.
Conservation Commission anymore?
Yes, it's defunct at this point.
Okay,
Can we put that in the agenda of the next select board meeting, please, just to see if there's
To
anything.
go
we
over
can-
it. Yeah.
Sorry,
To
yeah,
probably discuss it more, yeah. 'Cause I think Janet, you tried to reach out to Karen.
Yeah, and I didn't realize Karen's pretty ill, so
Yeah.
is that why she stepped off? Or she suggested contacting
Yeah,
William?
well, I haven't even heard that from her yet,
Yeah,
so.
she is, she's kind of
They
serious.
would have had a quorum, but when I heard that about Karen, it's kind of done at this point.
Yeah, she said Bill Pratt is the one person to connect with, and I wasn't able to.
Okay.
That's it, so.
so I guess we'll table any
Yeah.
discussion with them until they get up and running again. Julie, you
Yes.
reached out to DEP about scaling?
Yes, scaling. And that was this like to tear up the pavement.
The non-elevated part of the
Yes, that was a no-go,
no-go.
So you can't do anything to it other than cover it.
cover it.
Okay.
That
Good.
portion was a no-go.
Okay. And that includes, at one point, I thought there was a unrestricted area along the eastern border where next to the houses
They would like to keep the pavement intact.
across the whole thing, even though there was no
even
issue
though it's not
along.
intact, correct. They just
Okay.
don't want us, there's, like they said, there's no real way to dig that up without,
Disturbing.
up.
Okay. All right,
Can I ask one question? related to
John, please, yes.
Do you know, did you mention? Show this great photograph here that you may not be able to see, but there's a pad and then there's this big debris pile where they must have put all the, just,
yeah, I'm getting to that.
okay.
I thought I was just following the agenda.
Yeah.
Fine.
Down.
Okay, next issue was, I was going to contact the fire chief to talk about expenses regarding getting rid of the Hofs's house, should that be the option. Fire chief is out of town. He's going to get back to me sometime later this week.
Is it still up that you're not gonna try to burn that, right? No,
But-
because there's asbestos shingles, so.
I was going to talk to the fire chief
Right,
about how they would do that, and they would remove the asbestos before they would burn the structure.
So somehow, so there'd be a plan to take those shingles
Exactly,
off.
exactly, right.
And then, okay,
And this was just, if we decide to not sell the house and to demolish it, this
Right.
was just one option
I see.
as opposed to demolishing it straight out.
Just straight out, okay.
And then I had asked Marcus afterwards to give us an estimate for the quartz on the slab, and he sent that out in an email today. Do you have copies there, Marcus? Oh, perfect. Yep.
I don't even know. I don't know if you want me to try and take one and screen share so it's up on there or.
Is anybody,
Share these.
nobody's viewing remotely, right?
No one's viewing remotely. Carl said he'll probably attend in like the last 15 minutes.
Okay, so,
There's
I have
not
it
that
in
many. It's like the third or fourth page, I think, goes over that.
Yeah.
so if,
So I kind of, I've got a bunch of stuff to do. So Mark asked me to put this together. He wanted a visual of what the courts might look like and if they would fit on the pad. And so, page one is just that white square is exactly, that would fit one basketball court and 2 tennis courts that would also house 4 pickleball courts.
so the pickleball courts would be on the tennis courts,
On the
basically.
tennis court, there would be, on each side of the net, there would be a pickleball court.
Okay,
So there'd be 4 pickleball courts on the 2 tennis courts.
okay,
There's enough room for that. And so that's page 3, she kind of shows the courts, but it's just, it's just that white
Yep.
square filled in. Page 2 was kind of what I had talked about last meeting of what I kind of saw for it. Yeah, I'm not an architect or engineer. I saw it playing out in my head. And then page 4 is just dimensions of everything.
Quite a bit of slab that would not be covered with quartz.
Yeah, there's plenty of space there for,
Okay.
like I said, that would kind of give us everything, I would think, like 2 tennis courts and 4 pickleball courts is plenty, and then one full basketball court.
Okay.
I don't see why we would need more than that.
leaves room for the electric courts.
What do you
It's a
mean
joke,
by
we're all
elevated?
running.
Pointing out
So,
that
so
that-
yeah, the part that says elevated is just stuff that's elevated from the parking right now.
That's the
So,
building footprint.
so where the court space is and where it says elevated, that's all elevated above the parking, as well as the structure in the back where I put green space. I know when we talked about the capping, we talked about maybe not like, in my head, I saw a cap that went up over everything. But it kind of sounded like it wouldn't be that way. It might just be the parking lot and then like just a little bit over the elevated building footprint. So I just put that in there so people knew what was higher than the rest. And like the front part out near 220 where it says elevated, like I have no idea what we would do with that right now. But because
Is underneath those courts, it's gonna be, because it seems like it's a slope, so it would be graded, correct?
we
so it's
wanted some
level?
type of grade on it so that
So it's
water.
level?
Yeah, so when they would cap it, if we were gonna put courts there,
Right.
the guys said that there
There
would
would
be
be
some
like
way,
natural, some type of.
yeah,
drainage.
some kind of drainage built into the cap that would.
We're talking asphalt courts and
Yeah, like a smart court type stuff they use now, but yeah, it's kind of asphalty. It's not like road pavement, but it's. Yeah,
And that's-
it's like a little rubbery.
That's compatible with whatever material they would put down to cover the slab.
I would.
Well, DEP would have to approve it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Bob?
Would that do away with the need for the tennis courts? Would that serve as a substitute or replacement for the tennis courts up by the school?
Yes.
So theoretically, you could just let those go.
Thank you, Marcus. Any other questions about the amount of space being designated for courts?
Do you want me to give you DEP's thoughts on that?
Yes.
yes, please.
Absolutely.
They like that.
Oh, good.
They could get into that.
Yeah.
The only thing he said is even going over the restricted area there, wherever the placement is, they just have to review it.
Okay.
But they love the idea of courts, and I actually asked him about, because I don't remember if this was my outside voice or my inside voice said this, but everybody talks about the pavilion. But a pavilion maybe that's covered, not four-sided, but just a roof type
Squares.
pavilion might be good, because then if it was concreted, you could have like performances there. You could Marcus could lead yoga there.
I can organize.
But I just thought that might be, I mean, even if you wanted to in summer, like put ping pong tables out there or something like that, like more like an outdoor, but he said that's all good as far as the courts, and he actually thought that was a really good idea, because then you're not digging anything up, you're adding to it. And he had the same concern that our engineer had, that just remember when you're making these caps with grass doesn't always grow,
Right.
you need a lot of water for that. So he was and he's like, there might be other ideas, but he sounded actually excited.
Great.
That was Max.
That was Max, not our Max.
Right.
Max out.
Okay.
The engineer that came over, is he going to give us information about technical feasibility of putting these courts on there? Now,
After we get back to him.
The ground, covering the ground with either asphalt or this other material or whatever. You need to set posts in the ground, and I noticed that the slab is elevated, so it's probably going to have to be some handrails of some sort. Can we drill into that concrete and have DEP's blessing?
Well, that's stuff that he'll have to, once we decide, like, I'm sure he'll do all of that.
Okay.
He'll meet with them and decide, but I don't think there's gonna be an issue. At
I'm just
least,
thinking of technically how we would put
Well, with the
those
covenant,
things
you
in.
can't.
and I mean, to me, it seemed like stuff was gonna have to be added.
Right.
Like, even on the elevated section and stuff, there's gonna have to be
It's not just gonna be how it is now elevated.
Right, you're
with
gonna
what's
add
on top of it. There's
quite a
gonna-
bit of concrete or something to that,
Okay, right.
that you could then sink like fence
Then-
posts and things into. That was my understanding, or at least you could put it in the dirt next to the burn. I'm assuming when you burn
I
it
didn't know
up, I
how
don't know.
thick a coating we were talking
It's,
about.
it's not super thick. And again, yes, it's on the elevated building footprint. But if we're capping the rest of the property, it's not gonna be like, it's like a 3-foot drop
You
right
could
now.
just,
You could
you could tumble down.
level it all out so that it's not even a step.
And
up
I'm
there.
assuming that we're gonna have to have fences and things like that,
Yeah.
but I believe when we initially talked to Rob before he showed here, he said there'll be opportunities to have the posts where we'll need them.
It's a good question, though, even just the tennis court, the
Mhm.
structures
For the
that have to
net.
go in the ground. I remember when we talked about solar with Max, he was talking about ballasting it because you couldn't put in,
But I don't think we were talking about filling in.
putting the cap on, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
hopefully that-
filling in, like, I think you're gonna have to add concrete to the base to get the right
Make sure it's level.
level.
Yeah,
And then runoff, and then you would put that on top. So I'm assuming you would set anything you needed to in that
In
concrete
the
base.
concrete, anchor bolts or whatever.
Yeah, but I will definitely, when that time comes, I'm sure. And like he said, have your engineer, when you get to that point, send us a plan. We'll be more than happy. He's, like I said, he was excited about this. So he was good with the courts and he was good with some type of a pavilion with just a roof, over it, if you wanted to. Had more space to cover up.
So we could do a farmer's market.
You could do a farmer's market.
Make sure there are benches so that the people can watch.
Well, it would be, I was actually thinking it might be a nice place to have a couple picnic tables too,
Yeah.
because, you could have crafts and things like, it opened up a lot with that open air theater feel,
Yeah, I don't know what will go there all the time, but I know when we take our summer rec kids, most of the parks we go to, but the one in Wiscasset, for instance, they have a big open air pavilion. And so when we take our kids swimming over at Wiscasset Rec, and then we stop there for lunch, and the kids can play on the playground, but we can also sit under the pavilion and eat lunch when it's 80
I was also
degrees outside.
thinking it'd be great for like a splash pad, but probably not, because you'd have to recycle the water. But those things where the water comes out of the ground, you put your foot down and it pops out someplace else. Kids love that.
That's what you were talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and town water is there.
town
so-
water's there, but it again, that's
And
just,
sewer.
but there's plenty of other things we can
That's
think
stage
of.
5.
Yeah, that's-
But I didn't ask him about that because I didn't want him to say no, and I was on such a roll with him. I was like, "Yay, we're going for it."
Okay, well, great. Any other questions for Julie? Anything else you want to report from DEP, Julie, or?
I'll follow the agenda.
Okay,
That way I can organize my thoughts.
all right. Okay, so then, Janet, you had the opportunity to walk the trail with somebody from Midcoast Conservancy?
Michael came with me so you can chime in,
Okay.
and Charlie Witherell, who's the head of the trail crew for the Madomic area for Midcoast. And so Charlie walked it with us, which was really helpful. And we also walked behind the Hofs's house, which is probably even more beautiful than the
It's
part
gorgeous.
that we had that marked a trail in. So that adds another, 7 acres if we want to have a trail. And also behind the house where it's cleared, it could be just leave it for like a butterfly garden or something. I don't know, mow a path through it and let it be a field that you mow periodically. So anyway, there's a lot of options. And when we walked it, there's just more to it than when we did our real quick walkthrough a few months ago. And the takeaway I got, well, a couple of things is, yes, they'd love to work with us, Midcoast. And Charlie is willing to lead the crew, design, where there should be bridges, all that kind of stuff. And he said they have the time to do it. They love doing new projects and he has a lot of people and we can work with them. So he's gung ho. He also said it probably will take close to 2 years to do it right. And I think they're concerned with, having this pad, at least the design all figured out before they start the trail. Like, are you gonna have it, where do you want a kiosk, or where are you gonna start and end it? It will help to know what the plan is for the pad first. Although he could start laying it out, this summer conceivably. So gung ho on that. And Morgan Price, some of you may have met, she's based in the office in Waldeboro, Midcoast office. And she's done a lot of trail work as well, so she's gonna be the liaison, and she'd love to come to our next meeting if we want to dedicate a little time
Excellent.
to that. I've already told her a date, she can come if we stick to that date. So I think, I think we should just step back a little bit, and if we have to have a 75-foot setback. One thing they did say is, the one thing about dogs that's a concern on a recre or brownfield site is digging. You're not supposed to disturb the soil, and dogs like to dig, so that was a concern. And the other thing we noticed is one of the streams behind the building is just full of dangerous stuff, sharp rebar,
Glass.
dumped
Metal.
old barrels. There's a couple places where there's dumps.
At the
on top.
Hobson's house.
No, well, no, right
It's in
behind,
it's
there's
in a
one behind,
gully, yeah.
the gully behind this, and then there's also some more sort of behind the Hofses. So there needs to be some cleanup work done there to make it safe. And we were also looking at that big pile of rubble. There's a lot of places that really aren't safe right now for people to wander through. There's just sharp stuff and debris. So I think we need to think about that.
The one debris field that you did bring up, the DEP did say he's gonna contact Lead Vance about that.
Yeah, there's one other thing I'll mention along those lines if he's going to do that. Maybe I'll mention it now. You can see on this, there's a little clump of northern white cedar here. We thought, oh, that's kind of cool. There's a clump of cedar. We went up to it, and it's in a perfect circle around this concrete base with a big pipe sticking out, like it's hiding it. So when you talk to Max, ask him about this little clump of cedar, which is
Mhm.
right here.
Okay.
And there's two wells that I don't think are that well. It looks like a big well, but something really strange there that's gonna have to be dealt with. So another question mark.
I have some concerns. Gina, did you say there's barrels there?
That, yeah, when
Do we know what is in those
they're
barrels?
rusted out barrels, and I remember when we were trying to get Lead Vance to find
Right.
the outer extent of the plume.
Yes,
And that's why they put the two monitoring wells on the Hofs's property, was because of that
barrel, right,
pile of stuff in the stream.
right.
So I don't think they found any more VOC.
Like
or
TCE or anything of
Yeah.
that nature?
But it's more just rusted, sharp
I see.
stuff. There's a lot of it back there that needs to be cleaned up, as part of the trail work. Maybe the trail crew can help, or we can get volunteers.
And we still get those reports. I recall 4 or 5 years ago that they used to give us a report every 3 months. Are those still forthcoming?
They are.
Once a year now, though.
Once a
It's
year
just
now.
once a year. So was there any,
You guys
Wait a-
had I believe I sent out the last report that we received last year, and then I think we're due shortly for this one. I think it's May.
okay, because I'd love to review it because I have every one of them for the last 4 or 5 years. So it'd be nice to compare them.
Bob,
I'm just wondering if one option in terms of that area back of the hospice house is to fill it in as opposed to cleaning it out.
The stream, it's more,
It's a runoff area, so you might have to put a
I think it's gonna,
conduit or something in there.
I think it'd be better to clean it out.
Would it be?
I mean,
Okay.
if you haven't walked back there, there's what, like 4 or 5 gullies?
I was just worried what they might dig up when they're cleaning it out. And
that would,
maybe
that would be
I'm-
my question about.
But that's on the Hofstas property.
It is.
Well, no, one of the gullies is sort of.
Oh, I thought where the debris was
No,
behind the
there's a
Hofstas.
couple
There's a couple
garbage
spots, yeah.
piles
One
back
is,
there.
one is on the Hofs's
What would be
property, I
really
think, and
great
the other
is
on
if
the-
we can GPS locate them, and then
Well-
I can give those to Max.
When Charlie walks it again, he wants to GPS everything. And he doesn't want to just lay out a trail without doing, because already we figured we'd reroute the one part in a couple places just because there's more room. And so he'll come and spend a lot of time figuring out with whoever wants to be involved, a potential location. Yeah, and we'll GPS all the sites that are hazards, because there's several. And the other thing I'll just say, from the more I've been thinking about this, my parents used to live in Belfast, and there's a city park there. Has anyone ever been to the Belfast City Park?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's only open dawn to dusk, so they don't have to deal with lights, which I think is a good thing. And they do that partly just to not have to deal with other
No light,
issues
no light
related.
pollution either.
Right.
Right.
But it made me realize that we're talking, the more we talk, the more we think we could do this, we could do this. And I almost feel like there needs to be a grant to get a landscape architect to design it all, because I feel like we're sort of doing it piecemeal, and it makes sense, like what you wanted to do, but it just, like where the parking really makes sense ergonomically to have the parking, or, you know, just to look at it more big picture. And the fact that we can have, you know, 20 acres of it be walking is wonderful. They don't have that there, but they have dog walking and pickleball and tennis and open space, and it's on the water in their case. But it made me realize that we're talking about that here now, with all these ideas people are throwing out. A really cool town park that has a whole lot of things in it. And I just think it might be nice to have an expert who's,
And do you want it lit?
I personally feel like that could drop. There's a lot of vandalism on the back, like spray painted sad things on some of the back. I just think it might cause more problems than it would solve, you know. But that'd be a good question to ask, like a Belfast, you know, what's your experience? Or some places that might have a night, you know, lights on at night. They don't. They have a basketball court, they have pickleball, they have tennis. But they close it, I think, at 8 in the summer. And they have a gate, but people can still walk their dogs and walk on the trails. They just don't keep.
You just don't want people walking at night.
Right.
You know, I think you should
Well,
dawn to dusk.
But do you want to have people have access to the courts at night? I don't know what the demand is for basketball in the summertime, but
Yeah, I mean, summertime, it doesn't get dark until 9 o'clock at night, so I don't see
No
any
need.
reason we need
Okay.
them out there after
Okay.
that. Oh, there's a lot of parks that don't have lights.
Yeah, the
And
dawn to dusk.
Yeah.
I like the
is
dawn to
pretty
dusk.
tough.
Yeah, it just keeps it, I think
Yeah.
it saves
was-
the town.
If it was like a winter thing where it got dark at like 4 o'clock at night, then it's a problem, but.
Right. nobody's going to play basketball.
Right.
And that can come later too.
I love the idea of an architect, landscape architect, but I do think we have to have a pretty good idea of what it is we want
Yeah.
before we
Yeah.
talk to them.
I agree with that
Yeah.
too, but like I think yours, yes, we
Yeah.
want that, and yes, we want trails
Right.
and parking and
Yeah.
maybe the pavilion.
And we had a wonderful group of students come down from UMO that I'm sure would love to sink their teeth into something like that.
That's the question I had
They
was
did
whether or
that
not we could
for
get a
the,
graduate student.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ones who did like the Worcester parking lot and all
Yes.
those, yeah.
That would be cool.
That would be just, to me, that's, I mean,
So a landscape artist, you could, instead of paying them a lot of money, I'm assuming, where would that money come from if you had to do it professionally
we would get, I would say we would probably get a grant for that.
versus a?
Yeah, and of course, Bob immediately looks at me. I can see you doing
Max
it.
knows where the money.
But I
is.
do think the UMO students would be
Right.
like a really great first line to give us some
Oh,
really good
absolutely, yeah.
impressions.
Yeah.
And save us some money.
And save
Yeah.
you some money. And it really, I gotta tell you, they did a fabulous
Oh, they
job.
were fantastic.
And
They were
just,
great.
just somebody too that could sort of start to create visualizations for what we're talking
Mhm.
about. What would the courts look like? What would the pavilion look like and stuff like that? Because I'm having a hard time. I sort of have a mental picture, but having a hard time.
It's very hard to
having
visualize.
which-
and-
Yeah, well, how
I'm
we
also
would share with the public.
Drainage and slopes and,
Right.
you know, more of that, and it sounds like crew will be able to handle some of that, but,
Yeah,
you
Rob.
know, what people like to walk up to get to the
Right.
pickleball court or whatever, you know, that's
Right.
those kinds of things.
Handicapped access, and
Yeah,
things
they
like
don't
that.
have a landscape architect on their staff. He said that during the meeting.
I know, so that's why I feel like
That's why it's even more important.
yes. I think that maybe there's some volunteers in town too. We could.
Would cleaning up that debris pile that Janet mentioned and stuff, would that constitute disturbing the?
That's why he
Sure.
was gonna talk to, he's reaching out to Lead Vance about those areas. I think the
Okay.
area behind the Hofstas house, I think we're okay with.
Okay,
They should clean it all up,
But yeah, that's,
including the houses, because the trails would go back there too, potentially.
and I think Bob brought up a good idea. There are times where do we take it out or do we just cover it up?
Right.
But I think anytime we do anything like that, that's gotta go to them anyway. So at least if I could have a list of everything that you wanna chat about with, but doing it by GPS would be really good, because then we'll know exactly what we're looking at.
great.
If you
Alright.
would mind, next time
Yeah.
you guys go out.
any other questions for Janet?
Just a couple of observations. There are lots of invasives in that parcel, barberries, pasture roses. Since we can't dig, we can't get them out. The
I don't
only
even
thing,
know about spraying.
all you can do is spray them if you can't dig. So are we gonna leave the,
I don't know.
are we
That's a-
gonna
that's a
leave the
great-
barberries there?
That is a great question. I will ask Max.
You know, honestly, I feel like, well, the barberry, would be nice, so it doesn't spread, but if you contain it through mowing, we might have some patches of multiflora roads or something, but I don't think it's a big deal. We can keep it from spreading.
You know, the barberries,
That's might be.
they are a real problem because they make the ticks worse. The animals that might eat ticks can't get through the barberries because they're just too.
I'll ask Morgan that too,
Yeah.
because Midcoast has an invasive group. And maybe that would be something they tackle along the trails.
I can ask them. I will ask Max about
Okay,
that.
and I'll check Morgan with Morgan.
With regard to the debris that in shards of glass and metal that we found. If this might be a question for DEP. If stuff is just lying there, if it's an old tin can that was on a tomato can, can we just go down there and throw it in a trash bag and throw it out?
I'm gonna say I think you can, but I'm gonna confirm that with Max.
Okay, as long as we're not doing any excavation in the soil, can we clean, I mean, with that sort of covenant in mind, can we do that?
I would think so, but I will, but I think Max's thought was maybe we can get a little help for that.
Yes, from Leadville.
Not me. Yeah.
Max Al, not Mighty Max.
DEP map.
Yeah, they should
And then
be able to leave that.
To sort of answer Johnny's question about what's in those debris fields, there is portable equipment that can give you an overview type of analysis. They make VOC detectors, handheld VOC detectors, and they make something called X-ray fluorescence analyzers. Does the state DEP, and I don't recommend, when we first formed this committee, I was thinking about this problem because we didn't know what was out there. And I actually looked around for this type of equipment, but the state may have it. And it's, I mean, the X-ray fluorescence analyzer, you just push it on something and it'll give you an elemental analysis in seconds. So if there was.
I know they
arsenic
did
or
the one
molybdenum or
behind the
whatever.
Hofs's house. I don't know what other ones they've done.
Well, I'm assuming when the engineering group that went back there and found that, the big pile, and then they put in the additional wells to the south of it. I'm assuming they did that, but that's another question. Is that?
I
part of the
seem to remember
engineers?
that discussion when
They
they came
should have.
back and talked to us about that.
Yeah, because
I remember them saying they had,
I
it
thought
was,
so too, but I'm
it
not
was
sure.
strictly a debris pile they assumed from the Hofs's house at the time.
no.
No,
They did think it was from the house.
Yeah.
The one behind the house.
the one behind the house.
Yeah, they thought it was a debris pile.
No, but when they saw the barrels, that's when they
Okay,
decided
the-
they had to test. They were.
Right, but then they came back after that.
5:15.
Well, anyway, we can clarify.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I will
Max-
clarify that with them.
And that'd be great if lead bands would come clean it up. They should.
Okay,
Looking for state assistance, this could be something that they could spend one day
Mhm.
with a VOC analyzer and a elemental analyzer and
A VOC and
The-
elemental.
yes,
The
X-ray
volatile
fluorescence,
organic.
portable X-ray fluorescence.
And
and
that was
portable
the
VOC.
portable X-ray fluorescence.
Why don't I put that down as something that I will send to
Why don't you email me that when I email you the Excel sheet from our prior meeting? Email it right back. I've been with Mark and Mike now since 3:30 and Bob. They just can't stop volunteering. It's great.
Okay, any other questions for Janet? Janet, thank you so much for such a thorough job.
Well, it's nice Nikos is psyched.
Yeah, and I like the idea that we're now thinking in terms of the back of the house's house as part of the bigger lot.
Yeah,
'cause-
there's a stone wall that it shows on the big map, but if it's within the 2 acre, that would be the logical cutoff. You got your boundary right there on the map.
Does the back of the Hofs's house go into the same ruling as the whole other?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
all.
it's
one
all under the covenant.
Okay.
It's the pending restricted zone. though. Whatever pending means.
Yeah.
So that's a nice segue to the next agenda item. I had asked Bob to go to the select board with our recommendation that they put the house's house on the market And
Oh,
they
thank God. I
immediately,
thought you were gonna ask me about something else.
they immediately said, sure, we'll do that.
You had me worried.
No, so they sent it back to us.
They did. They knocked it right back to the
Would you
board
explain what you?
and said they would like you to look at some real estate agents and make a recommendation. And they said they would like you to develop a vision for the house's property and maybe write up kind of an RFP so that somebody who's interested in buying it would know what the town is looking for. Janet looks perplexed.
No, not perplexed, it's just like
Oh,
more work.
more work.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we probably ought to put together a small group.
I was actually
Do it.
going to suggest that we have a trail subcommittee, house subcommittee, maybe even a rec subcommittee, just people who take more responsibility for pursuing certain things. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else.
So it was like conditions for sale is what they said. You know, overall, they love your vision, but
Right.
in order to list it, they would like you to come up with conditions for sale of the property that would include, you know, it has to go through DEP approval. But they also wanted you to recommend development standards. So obviously, we know we can't have residential there. But are you open to like a professional office there? But at the same token, would you be open to a garage that works on cars there? So you have to think about what kind of use you want to see there. So not just, we just want it used commercially, but what type of commercial uses would you want allowed there?
So if I remember, the vote was specifically against commercial development
Yeah, I
of
thought
the,
it was for rec,
property,
and I
right?
thought recreation, I mean, residential was a potential option, but we had.
Well, residential is only a potential option if you petition to have it to the DP. Is
Right.
that something you want the town to undertake?
That's what we were recommending, I think.
Yeah, I think we should try to do that. If it's simply a matter of writing a letter to Max and describing what our vision is and saying that residential would fit into this and explaining that that property, that 2-acre parcel would never have been exposed to the plume and that
So I think
people
it's
lived
more
on it.
complicated
for
than, I
years.
think that requires an engineer and things that are beyond the scope of Julie writing a letter.
And just.
And I don't think that's what the select board understood.
No, I agree with that. I think they were speaking in broader terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure with what the survey said, it was they didn't want us to lease it out for commercial or nonprofit, but for sale, it was just sell it to whoever wants to do anything with the property.
Okay.
Could be residential, could be commercial.
Well, I had the good.
And-
I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, sorry, I saw.
Yeah,
Well, Mark should actually.
So
Elida?
we come up with this, word you said,
Developmental standards.
well, the developmental standards, and then it goes back to the select board says, great, this is a beautiful job you've done.
Mhm.
Then,
That would be-
do we get to decide if the person can buy it or not?
So,
Once-
well,
once an
so-
offer comes to the table?
So what I would say is, those would be the developmental standards or what, that you put out with the real estate offering.
Yeah.
So that when somebody, a potential buyer comes in, they know, okay, we're gonna put in an offer for this property and this is what they want to see. You could also put in there, and I think this might have been Bob who brought it up, that you could put because one of the concerns was how long does it sit in the condition it sits? But you could put in time standards too, like we'd like this redeveloped in 2 years. You could also have a bonding requirement for that. So those are things that the subcommittee would put in there and say, hey, this is what we want to see. And that would be put out with the real estate offer.
Right.
And then I think I can't speak for them. We didn't get that far down the road, but I would assume they would also say then make a recommendation. Here's all our offers. Why doesn't the committee look at this and make a recommendation of which one we should accept?
Johnny?
Well, I had the pleasure to go down Thursday to have a site view. I don't know how many of you guys have been down there in the last month, 6 months. Anybody? Inside the
Inside.
actual
Oh,
house?
inside the building, no.
Okay, I went in there and I was mortified at the condition of that place. It was absolutely I can't imagine anybody, I mean, I'm not an expert on reconditioning stuff, but I can't imagine someone tearing all that stuff out, the mold, the asbestos, the junk. I mean, I've got a half a dozen pictures of it, and I just keep looking at them thinking, I suppose if someone wanted to buy it and do something, but I think the plan would have to be, how are you going to get rid of those asbestos shingles? How are you going to remediate the mold? Is the building, does it have good bones? The roof is actually gone. You can see out, you know. So I confess my naivety. I suppose somebody could go in there and refurbish it, but I just can't see it.
They may, or they might want to tear it down.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
the only thing I thought of when I was talking to Max, I said, Max, someone should go in here, because there's a lot of various artifacts and memorabilia and old magazines and bottles. Someone should go in there and grab that and have a little yard sale, or just raise the whole thing and start fresh.
Well, the Historical Society's already been there.
Did they been there? And then there's, okay.
Yep.
I was just amazed at,
Yeah.
But I do think that, like I said, either way, whatever way
right?
anybody wants to go, but there should be some parameters for what the use would be.
Right.
Because that's the
Right.
only way that the select board can control as far as what, if you're worried about what's could potentially be your neighbor, then this.
Right.
What's it gonna
Patty?
look like?
Just a quick segue on that. I had somebody in town ask that before it gets raised, if that's where it goes, is there an opportunity to go for architectural salvage in there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
Well,
stuff in
yeah.
there. There's interesting
Well, I
stuff in
think
there.
that anything like that would have to be put out to bid. If somebody wants to architecturally salvage somebody.
The other thing that Bob came up with was a assessment of the property. And currently at 9.3 acres, the land is valued at $48,000, so roughly $5,000 an acre. And the house is valued at $26,000. So we're talking, I don't know that we would get that, but that's where the current assessment is
A
at
couple of
30.
acres is 10.
Yep.
plus
26.
Whatever the house is, we might have to pay somebody. to
But
take
I
the
thought
house
it
out.
wanted, you guys wanted to split it down to two.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, just 2 acres would be $10,000. So,
Well, that parcel is waterfront.
Yeah,
I
so that
think-
must-
That is worth a lot more than $48,000 with, if you include the waterfront.
Except you really can't build down. on the lot.
right,
But I didn't think we were selling the water.
right. I thought we
We
were,
weren't
selling the
planning on doing that.
right.
I have just
No, I hear you.
objected
And
to
who
that
knows what the market, will do?
48,000.
Who knows what the market will
That's the
do?
market value.
Yeah, they sold, what was it, some acreage down on Friendship Road. It was marketed for 205 and it went for 306. And
Just-
that was a couple of weeks ago.
And that
I mean,
is a
the
beautiful
market's
shoreline.
crazy.
That is
Yeah,
a really beautiful shoreline.
yeah, it is.
Which is why we want to make it into a park.
Well, I'm getting the heebie-jeebies, but go ahead. Or you were gonna say something.
No, it was,
Oh, I just had a question. Would we possibly have access to some help from an attorney to figure out these terms of sale? I just wouldn't know where to go without an attorney's help.
I would say
I bring an attorney in last thing. I never like an attorney to negotiate the commercial aspects of a transaction because that's where you run up the
Yeah.
charges.
Yeah,
But certainly it would be reviewed. by
yeah,
an
and
attorney.
I think they just want your feelings of what do you want to see there? Do
Yeah.
you want, like, if somebody said, I'm going to raise the building and I'm gonna put a attorney's office there, is that something that's acceptable? I want to put a go-kart track there, electric go-kart track there. Maybe that might not be acceptable, but I'm just saying, like, the different things that you might want to do. Somebody just have in mind what you'd like to restrict professional offices versus, obviously you're not gonna have a hotel there. You're not gonna have a daycare there, but other things. And that was the other question is, are you leaving that up to getting the residential part lifted to the potential buyer? Or is that something that you want the town to pursue, which then does cost money and require professionals?
so those are great questions. Should we think about how to envision that a lot? And sort of have a framework to move forward with, and then have a subcommittee work on developing a plan from that framework.
And I loved your idea of like using the wall,
Yeah.
the natural boundary.
Sure. But I hadn't thought about an office building. And I'd be more inclined to have somebody tear down that or renovate that building to have an attorney's office as opposed to somebody tearing it down and putting up a storage facility.
Yeah.
So there'd be certain things that I'd be more inclined to support for commercial development and as opposed to just straight commercial. But I don't know if we can make those kinds of
You can, and
limitations.
make those,
can.
you can,
I mean, it's like an endless list though.
right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they're gonna have to give you the proposal. So when they're putting in their bid, what are you going to do with the property? How long is it gonna take to accomplish?
I feel like a first step is to talk to a real, I don't know
Right.
if the town works, but just to get a sense of, is this likely to attract a buyer before we put all this time into it?
Yeah.
Just
And
as with, you know,
Right.
with an outline roughly of the restrictions we think we're gonna need to put.
there are, so the practice has always been that the town was always, and this is long before it existed, prior to my arrival, was we go to the people who have real estate agencies in town.
I would suggest Carlton Johnson.
But
That's the guy I'd
but
suggest.
if you would like, you can interview all three and make a recommendation of which one you would like to use.
I think that's a different thing. I think
Yeah.
Janet's talking about getting advice from.
Yeah, I
a
want
realtor.
not to
Right,
hire the
right.
realtor to do this yet, but to just say,
Right.
do you think this is doable? To me, it
I'm-
feels like a big time sink.
And my thing too would be though, you might want to talk to all three first because you don't want to go to one and get advice for free and then list with another one.
Elida, did you have a question?
Yes, but the bubble just burst. I don't know what it was.
I saw it above your head for just a second, but I couldn't read it.
Like, I got a comment.
Okay, Johnny.
I was just gonna say, it's very subjective of what people could come up with any number of what they think is proper for that. So do you get the list out first and then have people bid? Or do you have the bid come in and then you discuss it and say, well, that's not really what we had in mind?
I
So
think
that
if
to
you
me
give
is-
them some guidelines of what
Right.
you're looking for. Otherwise, you're gonna have probably a lot of people putting in a lot of stuff that you're gonna have to weed knee deep through that.
Right.
And I mean, somebody, like, you're right, if storage is totally off the table, then that should be known right up front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you approach it as a list of things we don't want to see.
Okay.
That's,
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
what about the next landowner though? I mean, if you're truly concerned about that, the next owner, we're not gonna be able to restrict them anymore.
No, you can put
right?
a deed restriction on
That's
it.
Yeah,
Put
you
the
could-
restriction and put a bond.
Right.
Put a couple bonds.
Elida?
What, do we have to come up with a
From
recourse
performance
too
bonds.
if they don't live up to their responsibilities?
Well,
I mean, that's like.
that's been my issue with selling it the whole time is
Right. What kind of stick
Is
do we have if
what
they
kind
don't?
of stick? And, it's great to say, oh, we'll put up a bond or we'll do this, but it's still costly to have that stick. So you're right. If somebody goes past the 2 years,
Yeah.
Time suck, I agree with you.
if
Yeah.
somebody goes
Oh, sorry.
past, that was.
Yeah, I guess that's why it seems important to have some legal advice up front, because I don't know what kind of parameters we can put on a future owner.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Maybe someone else does, but it sounds like we're speculating a lot about that.
Yeah. I mean, based on, and I was wavering after the last meeting.
I'm
on what you
still,
said.
yeah.
Feeling like this just doesn't seem worth it to me,
I
especially
agree.
if that's its value. I mean, yes, maybe it'll turn into a property that can pay taxes to the town. I mean, that's the reason to do it, I guess.
Mhm.
But, since it's it really is a cool opportunity to have a town park with all these things on it. I mean, like a once in a town life's opportunity. So just putting that additional 2 acres on, I feel like just sort of rounds it out and won't be anything we'd regret, I don't think.
It's
And
just
would
a
save
tough
us all
call
this
because
trouble.
there's so much to it. You're right. And that's,
Well,
there is a lot to it. And like I said, after the fact, say we pick the best, you pick the best proposal there is. And we put a time limit on, we want to see something done in 2 years. And then it's the town's job to enforce that 2-year limit.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine anyone wanted to do it. I'm sort of feeling like, well, 6 months will go by and then we're back to
Who would
demolish.
have thought anybody would want to buy the Friendship Street School?
That looked a lot better than the Hobson's house. And it
Wow.
wasn't right next to a falling apart pad. and a
Beauty's in the eye of the
reckless-
beholder. I don't know. You
Well,
find some
so
reasons.
the
But I
one,
think if you're going to honor, because I got the impression everybody wanted to honor the non-binding referendum that we had.
Right.
Well, demolishing was a close second, it wasn't like save it at all costs, I didn't come away with that. I
That's
just felt
true.
like,
I mean,
They
it's up
look
to you
like
guys. But I mean, I just think that if you're going to put it out there, you've got to give people an idea, because that will save time and energy on the real estate's part and on our part, because when it went up the last time, we spent an inordinate amount of time asking questions, even though it wasn't for sale, but a lot of people, there was a lot of interest.
well, that's interesting that there was interest.
There
Yeah.
was interest, but it was, once they read, the problem was they didn't even read what the listing said, because they're like, what do you mean it has an environmental covenant? And that was very clear in the listing. So, that one, when it was listed, when Leadvance owned it, and we still had to say, you need to call the DEP. But, so, I mean, I just think everything has to be really clear from the get-go of, we don't want the storage unit. We don't mind professional commercial, but we don't want the storage unit. We don't want it to become,
so the other thing to keep in mind, I think, is also what is the potential value to be gained from sale? Friendship Street School, town got 300,000 plus. Here we're talking about an assessed value of maximum 36,000 for a house plus 2 acres. And I'd be surprised if anybody's willing to pay more than 15,000 for it, given the shape that it's in. So I don't know whether there is a significant financial gain for the town to make compared to holding on to it and dealing with it ourselves.
and that's that becomes my thing, is are we gonna spend $15,000 that we made to
Time to oversee it.
to make sure everything is enforced?
Right.
And you're thinking, well, yeah, but we'll have that $15,000 then to turn back into the property. But I would recommend whatever we sell it for, we retain a part to make the enforcement piece
Yep.
be real. And
Julie.
I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. It's just,
Would you have to, I'm sorry, would the town have to supply like a structural engineering report on that so someone else they would have to do it themselves?
Right.
yeah,
That would be on the buyer.
I mean,
So-
ours, it would be sold as is.
As it, okay, because
Gail?
I just have a suggestion. Perhaps the right thing to do is to have some conversations with a couple of realtors and get a sense of a likely going market rate.
If there is a
Bring-
market.
Bring that back to the next meeting and make a decision next month about whether or not we want to move forward with this.
But I would definitely talk to all three.
Great. Yep.
So I think it's
And-
They give a similar.
And
here
I-
on the corner, Lash and Jericho.
I would also suggest maybe at the same time follow up with if there's any sort of architectural salvage value to it. Is there a firm that we could contact? Do we know anything about?
I did in New Jersey. I knew somebody, but I don't
Can
know.
they be here by next month? Can you make a call?
Well, it's interesting because we could think about that from the AD Gray angle too.
You see
Yeah.
listings all
I
the
could have
time.
somebody list with both.
My wife, just for pleasure, reads real estate listings. And you
It's
see
fun.
handyman special or use your imagination to see what you can make out of this sow's ear. You know, the market value was what some individual or group of individuals say, I can do something with that.
Yeah.
And it's a highly individualized. What I find just atrocious, my wife sometimes likes. So it's just that the value is in the eye of the beholder. And if somebody wants this to be a project house and restore it to its former splendor, he might give you $60,000 for it. But if the other guy is looking for, a chief office space, he's going to tear it down. It all depends on, it's the eye of the beholder. And you don't know until you list it.
But I just think there should be, I think select board wanted some parameters to that because you don't want, you know,
Yeah.
the dollar offer to have a storage unit if you're not going to get the storage unit.
Bob,
Just to segue into what you said, and that is, I feel it's sort of incumbent on us to get that number. Because if we just go ahead and keep it and tear it down, we're gonna have to answer the question. Why did you do that?
Yeah. I agree.
And we don't have a reason, other than, it's too much work. And that's a valid reason.
Well, if it's $36,000, I feel like it's too much work. If we think a realtor says, yeah, I think there would be people interested in the project.
Yeah, what's the,
that
it's
would change.
75,000.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
I
that,
guarantee you,
that
somebody
changes
will
it.
come along and want to renovate that or.
Lida,
So I think we should go with Gail's idea and who would be willing to go talk to the realtor.
that's what I was gonna say. Who would be willing to be on the committee to contact
With a
realtors?
list of the
Yep.
general, like bond,
Yep.
all the things that was a good letter in the Lincoln County News that you wrote.
Oh, thanks.
But if you read it, it sort of outlines some of the things that might have to happen that a
Okay.
realtor should know about.
So,
I'm willing to be on it.
okay, Patty, Gail, I'm willing to do that too.
Yeah, Mark, likewise.
And Carl, okay,
Yes.
great.
Oh,
Right
that's
there.
great.
I didn't see you sneaking in the meeting, Carl. Welcome. Okay, so the four of us will talk about how to divvy up the work and reach out. And then we'll bring back to the committee next month, a report on what the realtors say. Okay,
I feel really good about this. We got four great people on the committee.
I think it's
We're
wonderful.
gonna get an answer. If we can-
Mark, there might be another objective.
Because I got a list.
Carl, what was that? I'm sorry.
Might want another deliverable for the next meeting, which is to look at the actual, a reasonable pro forma cost of the demolition.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're looking at extraordinary solid waste component and the asbestos shingle siding,
okay.
interior
Down
lead
the-
materials. You can figure that one out.
What we're gonna be looking, okay, good point. And I'll try to follow up with the fire chief too, to see what burning the property down, if that's the way we want to go, would be. The last item on the agenda was just referring back to the timeline that Elida and Gail had put together. And for the February meeting, they talked about making recommendations regarding pets. I think we've already resolved that issue. Vehicles. Would we envision people being able to drive snowmobiles or any other, so eliminate vehicle?
I would say it's too small.
Okay,
And the soil's soft in terms of mountain bikes or something.
and we certainly can't disturb the soil, so a vehicle would possibly, okay. Hunting and fishing, it's all within town limits, so hunting is off. How about fishing?
Although there's not going to be a trail down to the water's edge. It's salt marsh and mud along it. I mean, it's not like, I don't think you'd even have to prohibit it. I think you're just silent on fishing.
Okay,
Is the fishing though, the shellfish, you can't take shellfish, correct?
we can't take
So
shellfish,
the fish, would be a whole different
Yeah.
animal.
right?
Like Gail, I don't know. I mean, they actually get pogies even that far.
They do get, oh, they get pogies in the harbor, yeah.
But that's out of control of this.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody has a pole.
So, so we don't deal with the
Hit
fishing.
waders because of-
Exactly.
that shore is pretty muddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna go in there. You gotta have the right boots to even walk in it.
So those were the only recommendations that the timeline was considering at this point. So I think unless anybody else has anything they want to bring up, we can adjourn. Anybody? Meeting adjourned.
What day next month?
Um,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it'll be the,
Hey, Marcus, can you just click that off?
it'd be
Do you know how to do that?
March 6th.
March 6th.
Yeah,
Very
it's 28 days into February this year, so
Did you hit click end?
you'll be absent. Okay.
Bye, Carl.
Bye, Carl.
Good night.